Who are you?
I am a robotics technologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I'm the mobility lead for Mars Science Laboratory, which is the rover currently on Mars.
Okay, can you put that into layman's terms? You drive the Mars
I
Rover.
drive the Mars rover.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready to answer some fifth grader questions?
Let's do it.
All right, first question, very important. Is there any life on Mars?
There is not.
What?
I'm so sorry. This is the first question that I always get.
Oh, no.
If we knew, we would tell you.
I don't believe that. Are there any signs of life? I know you guys found water,
Yeah.
ice.
In some ways, there are signs of life. So Mars is an interesting place, and a lot of what we are doing on Mars is trying to determine not just if there's life now, which there may or may not be, but also if it was hospitable for life at any point in the past. And the way that we're doing that, we landed the rover in what we believed to be, from orbital imagery and orbital data, a former lake bed. So we are essentially driving from the bottom of a dried up lake bed to, not quite to the summit, but up a mountain adjacent to that former lake bed.
Okay.
And we're doing geological surveying along the way to essentially try and date how long ago was there water, how long was there water, and what does that mean about the habitability of Mars.
Interesting. So one of the questions, we're going to skip around as we go. One of the questions is, what kind of data does the rover pick up? Like, what you said, geological data. So what types of sensors and things are on there, and what is it picking up and
So there's
giving
a
you?
lot.
Okay.
MSL is Mars Science Laboratory, which most people maybe know by curiosity. Those are all the same thing.
Okay.
So MSL is colloquially referred to as the robotic geologist.
Robotic geologist.
Yes.
And that's what the rover's name is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
The rover you call MSL. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And
Robotic geologist?
the robotic geologist.
It's a good band name.
It is. Yeah. And the idea is that it's essentially doing the same things that a geologist on Earth would do, but it's doing it on Mars, and it's a robot.
Okay.
So it has several different instruments, some of which are extremely cool.
Okay.
And
What's
a
the
lot
coolest
of cameras.
instrument?
I think the coolest instrument we have is this instrument called ChemCam,
Cam.
which does this thing called laser ablation, which basically means it fires a laser
Okay.
at the ground, and
Okay.
it like fries a little piece of the ground.
Okay.
And then based on how the ground fries, we can tell exactly what the chemical composition is. It's the coolest thing
Whoa.
ever. It's really
and
wild.
people are doing that on Earth too?
People do
Geologists
that.
do that on
Yeah,
Earth.
it's called a LIBS beam.
A LIBS beam.
LIBS.
Okay.
They're really, really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And you can actually buy, they're like maybe $20,000 on Earth. You can buy your own. You can fire a laser at the ground, and it can tell you this is exactly
the chemical
chemical
makeup.
composition of the thing that you're firing a laser at.
Wow.
It's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
My students were really curious. They went to the planetarium as a field trip, and they saw this little documentary about Planet 9. Have you heard of Planet 9?
No.
You haven't heard of Planet 9. Apparently, it's the ninth planet, so Pluto
Yes.
is a dwarf planet, so it's not
This is
Planet
the
9.
hypothetical.
The hypothetical planet
Yes.
that's really far away, maybe, that might exist, and different astrophysicists start trying to find it and stuff like that. So you have heard of that?
So I'm casually familiar with it. So to say that I haven't is maybe not entirely true.
Okay.
But there's a funny thing about working for NASA and doing the job that I do, which is that I am not an astrophysicist.
Oh, right.
And I am not an astronomer. And so even though I know a lot about how we explore the solar system and the actual mechanisms that we use to make that happen, I am not actually qualified to address a lot of things as far as it relates to astrophysics.
That's interesting.
Which is very funny.
So you're technically an engineer.
I am an engineer.
Because that's what you studied in school.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Great.
Yes.
And you studied mechanical engineering.
I was mechanical engineering, yes.
At Columbia University.
That is correct.
In New York.
That is also correct.
But you also did some aerospace stuff through it, right? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
So I actually used to work at the Adler Planetarium.
Oh, really?
A little while ago, yeah.
Oh,
I worked
what
at
did
the
you
Adler
do?
Planetarium when I was 18, the summer before I went to college. Yeah, I was working there was this professor there, Dr. Mark Hammergren.
Okay.
Really sweet guy, who was leading a program for like young researchers. And I was working on some experiments that were going on helium balloon launches.
Okay.
So like big weather balloons that we would send to the edge of space.
The edge of space or the edge of...
The edge of space.
Where is that? So is that past Pluto?
That's not quite past Pluto.
Edge of space. Sorry,
edge of space meaning the edge of where our atmosphere.
That's what I thought. Okay, turns
the
into
border
space.
between Earth and space.
Doesn't space
Not
go
all
on
the way-
for a long, long
very,
time?
very, very long
That's what I
time.
thought. I thought
Yes.
space was, and isn't it getting bigger? Isn't
Yes,
that a
it's
thing too?
expanding.
It's expanding.
Yes,
So I don't think you're ever going to get to the edge of space.
That is correct.
So is that a
yes.
technical term, the edge of space, or no? Or
You know,
is that how you call it?
I think that's maybe how I would call it.
Okay.
There is an official number for where technically you are in space. And NASA
once you
astronauts,
leave the Earth's
when they
atmosphere.
fly that high, you're supposed to get your astronaut wings that say you're an astronaut that's flown in space. But that is actually kind of an arbitrary distinction because basically the atmosphere of Earth kind of fades away into space. It's not like there's
not a fine line.
There's not a
where
fine
the
line,
ozone breaks or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a fine line.
And one of the questions we had related to that was, do you know any astronauts personally?
I do know.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm actually buddies with Mike Massimino. Mike is really, really cool. And actually Mike has done a lot of YouTube videos. He just did a bunch of Wired ones.
Okay.
Like former
So I'll put a
astronaut
link.
Talks about,
Put a link
Watch his
under-
videos.
yeah.
They're great. He's so cool. And he was part of the Hubble repair mission. So
Okay.
it was his job to go to the Hubble telescope and fix the Hubble telescope. So he has one of the longer spacewalks ever done.
How long about is that?
Ooh, he was doing probably like 10-hour spacewalks.
10-hour
like really,
spacewalks.
really, really long. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a crazy story about his mission, which is that when he went to go to repair the Hubble telescope, there's a hatch in the way of all of the electronics that he was attempting to repair, and so he had to unscrew. They have these fancy astronaut hand tools, so a really, really fancy drill that he has to use to unscrew the bolts on the hatch, and he got through a few of the bolts and then he stripped one, which stripping a bolt is like when you are trying to torque a screw or a bolt and you turn it so hard that you break the bolt instead of unscrewing it.
It turns into, instead of like a hexagon, it turns into a circle.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah, it turns into mush.
Turns into mush.
And
metallic mush.
He had a mushy bolt. And
mushy
he was
bolt.
like, I can't open the door. I've spent years training for this, and one bolt stripped, and I can't even get into the telescope. And someone at Johnson Space Center, which is in Houston, which is where they work with the astronauts, they had a model.
Houston, we have a problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Yes. Houston, we've had a problem.
They had a model of an engineering model of the Hubble telescope, and he took all of the bolts off that Mike was able to get off and left that one bolt on, and took a force gauge and just yanked it.
What's a force gauge?
A force gauge is just a
force
tool.
gauge?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just a tool that lets you. It measures
like a
how
suction
much.
thing?
It's basically how hard are you pulling. So it's almost like a scale in reverse. It's a tension-based scale instead of a compression scale.
Okay.
And so he just yanked the door open, and was like, hey, Mike, it takes this much force to rip the door of the Hubble telescope open. Can you do it?
Okay.
And Mike was like, all right. And so they put this fancy tape called Kapton tape
Okay.
over the bolt because they knew when they ripped it open that there was going to be that the bolt that had broken was going to just disintegrate, basically. He was
Right.
going to break through the bolt. So there was going to be this shrapnel that would come off. And they
Right.
didn't want that because that's space junk, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. So they taped over the bolt and did the best that they could to prep it. And then Mike had to literally rip the door off.
Wow.
And that's how his mission
And
started.
were they able to fix the door afterwards?
You know what? I don't think they did.
Okay.
Maybe they did. I don't know that it matters.
Okay.
They probably did.
Yeah, and the Hubble telescope is basically a huge telescope that takes pictures very far away, right?
It's a telescope that just has very, very, very little light pollution because it's really far from Earth.
Oh, that
So
makes sense.
it can be totally dark. And so all those really, really beautiful pictures you see of like tons and tons and tons of galaxies in the same image, those are all taken from
Hubble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the cool space photos that
Okay.
we've seen are from Hubble.
And I'm going to put them up on the screen
Yeah.
right
Great.
now, and now,
Hubble.
and now, and one more. Isn't that pretty cool? Very cool.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.